Anyone, anywhere, at any time could become a victim of human trafficking.
It's not an African-American problem, it's not an Asian problem.
This crime it's an equal opportunity offender. It doesn't care socioeconomic status, it doesn't care where you live, it doesn't care what your zip code is.
It is an issue of human exploitation. This is not a race issue, it is not a gender issue. It is a human rights issue.
Anywhere there is a mobile population or poverty or any kind of domestic violence or sexual abuse, you're going to find trafficked people.
It preys on innocent, vulnerable children, and those are everywhere.
And it's really all of our problem.
California has the statistics for being the #1 state for the sex trafficking of minors.
Bringing victims into California, the perpetrator has the capacity to meet a high demand at a higher expense.
Right now, it's the second largest illegal business in the world after drugs, or equal to drugs.
Because you can only sell a drug once, and then you consume it. You can only sell a weapon once, but you can sell a person up to 50 times a day.
The average cost of a slave today is $90. If you have a woman who's a slave for you, you can earn money over and over and over and over from her. When you're tired of her, you can sell her to someone else. You can then get some new slaves.
And that's one reason why it is the fastest growing illegal activity right now, because first of all, the profits are very, very high. The average sex slave in the United States makes a clear profit of $67,382 a year for the trafficker. That's one woman in one brothel.
It's usually about the money. Human beings simply become commoditized. How is it the perpetrator thinks that I can fully exploit this human commodity? Quite frankly, the sad part of the story is when they're done, they dispose of that human commodity with much the same regard they would with a piece of equipment. Generally, of course, when you're looking primarily at sex trafficking, they're going to be focusing on the most attractive commodity available, so you see the victimization going for young girls and young women. But also young boys are very much involved as well. It's one of the areas that I believe is very largely unreported, simply because of some of the stigma attached to young boys being involved in sex trafficking.
And the demand in the United States and in Western Europe is highest for the 12 to 16-year-old range. It's a business for the traffickers, and they're going to supply what people demand. And right now the Johns, the guys who buy prostitutes, demand young girls.
That's the way the traffickers market these people. What's your taste? Do you like Asian women? Do you like European women? Do you like African American, or do you like African women?
One of the traffickers that I talked to said he really liked younger girls because it only took about a week before you could break their spirit entirely and know that they would never try to run away because there was nothing left. In fact, the way he put it was, 10 days to 2 weeks of gang rape and sodomy. Their eyes go blank and you know they're good to go. The youngest victim that I know of that was rescued from a brothel in Moldova was 9 months old. His mother was a woman that had been sold into slavery, and she gave birth in the brothel. He branded the baby as his property and then used the baby for oral sex in the brothel. In fact, the baby had, the back of his head was flat because he only sat up to eat. The rest of the time he was laying down. This child is not a baby to the traffickers, it's a commodity. It's there to make profit. So if there's somebody who wants oral sex with a 9-month-old, why not? It's a business.
Traffickers are looking for runaway kids. Sometimes they're kidnapping people right in front of their homes.
Typically, what the traffickers do is they spend about 2 weeks breaking a woman's spirit. It's called the softening up period. That's a period of about 2 weeks of gang rape and sodomy and other types of torture. And once a woman's broken, then she's sold to a brothel and forced to service sometimes up to 40 or 50 men a day. How's their mental attitude? Most of them want to die in the worst possible way.
My biggest thing is I come at this not from a background of expertise at all. I come from it, my position is as a mother. 2 years ago, I had a 17-year-old daughter who went to the grocery store on spring break one night and she never came home. And she was missing for 8 days. When she was recovered, we were introduced to the evil that is called human sex trafficking, because that's what had been happening to my daughter. They found her in a Bay Area motel in the Fremont area. She was trafficked from here to Rockland, to the Bay Area, back to Rockland, and back to the Bay Area again. The night my daughter was recovered, it opened up a whole new world and exposed me to an evil like nothing I had ever been exposed to before. I think it sounds offensive, human sex trafficking, but really it's a glossed over version of actually what's happening, and it's the perpetual violation and exploitation and rape of children.
One of the biggest ways that the traffickers advertise and find their customers is through Craigslist. What they'll do is get a slave, take pictures of her, and they'll post it on Craigslist, and they'll advertise what town they're going to be in and where they're going to be and where that girl will be available.
There's a couple of other websites that have popped up specifically for trafficking or for sex and for buying and selling of slaves, but Craigslist is by far the most popular, and it's everywhere.
How they found my daughter was because she was being advertised on Craigslist, but because the verbiage that the pimps use isn't everyday language, it's code. However, anybody that has anything to do with sex trafficking, prostitution, they are common terms. And it is very specific what the terms mean. I would like to see the website shut down. They're allowing a generation of girls to be sexually exploited.
Has the problem been repaired? No. But I think there is a measure more of accountability in dealing with that venue as a place of enabling this crime. And certainly, I would love to see a lot more accountability, a lot more of these social sites as they're hiding behind, being shut down and called for what they are.
As a mom of a victim, I say it's a bunch of garbage. I don't think that there should be any website out there wherever. I think the second it's found that there is any kind of activity that's occurring that has anything to do with prostitution or buying and selling of children for sex, the plug should be pulled. I, as a mom, don't understand how there's that gray area. To me, it's very black and white.
The criminal element is a growing and learning enterprise, they find ways to remain, quite frankly, a step ahead of law enforcement. That's their living. That's what they do. The more successful they can do that, either through technology or any other means, they'll find it. I always say, if you can think of it, there's probably someone out there already doing it.
What's happening now is they're using mobile brothels here in the United States. So they're those big black vans that bands tour the country in. Well, if you see one of those parked for 2 weeks in any one place, chances are it's a mobile brothel. If you see men coming at a regular rate into a house in the suburbs, because they also use now suburban homes as brothels, you know, if there's a lot of traffic in a home, something's going on. Just look a little bit beneath the surface, and if you really look at somebody, you can see if they're in trouble. So many people blame the victim, especially when it comes to sex trafficking. They think these women are prostitutes who are choosing to be in the fields. A 13-year-old girl who's gang raped and sodomized is not choosing to be a prostitute.
Most of these girls are runaways. So what people want to rationalize and say, well, if you didn't run away, that wouldn't have happened, so look, it's your fault. I don't care what the child's done. I don't care if they ran away or not. They did not consent to, or they do not think that it's okay to be raped and sexually exploited. And it does not make them any less a victim. Under any other circumstance, if you had a man, whether it's consenting or not, have a sex with a minor, it's statutory rape, period, no matter if it's consenting or not. But you can have a man who repeatedly violates and assaults and sexually assaults a child, but because he paid a pimp, it becomes prostitution, and then it becomes where the victim is the criminal. And how did that happen? How did we end up in a world where that makes sense? Because that doesn't make sense to me. People need to know, they need to be aware, and we need to stop allowing it.
And it's not just sex. These women end up with kidney problems, they end up with urinary tract problems, they end up with uteruses that need to be removed because they're so badly damaged. They've been sodomized with all different kinds of things. They've been beaten horribly and oftentimes left with permanent disabilities. So just the physical rehabilitation is really difficult. Most of them end up with some kind of STD or AIDS.
The problem with HIV and AIDS is really terrible because most women who work in brothels or who are slaves, don't get to set the rules, obviously. And so men who don't want to have sex with condoms are able to have sex any way they want. And so there's a lot of transmission of AIDS, and unfortunately when the women get sick, they're basically thrown away.
I hate to say it this way, and it offends a lot of people, but sex trafficking is really terrorism on a mass scale perpetrated by men against women and children, because 99.9% of the people who buy sex are men.
We've also learned that today many of the gangs in our country are turning to trafficking instead of drugs because it's a much easier and safer business for them to get into.
The man that was pimping my daughter out was arrested, and he pled guilty to sex trafficking of a minor and is serving 12.5 years in federal prison.
Since 2006, every state in the United States has adopted anti-trafficking laws. And since 2006, not a single person has been prosecuted under the state's anti-trafficking laws. Now, they have been prosecuted under federal law, but not under the state's laws. If you get caught, the fine is like $5,000 and 6 months to 2 years in jail. So, I mean, if you're making millions and millions of dollars a year off of all of these women that you have, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and the possible penalty is 6 months in jail, why not take the risk?
The punishment right now doesn't fit the crime, especially in the state of California. I couldn't even begin to go into the legal terms of it, but because of some of the things that were involved, some of the equipment that was used, the fact that my daughter's perpetrator trafficked her up and down an interstate, it became a federal crime. Federal laws are much stiffer, federal penalties are much stiffer than are the California laws. California has some of the most lax laws in the United States. There's not really a stiff penalty. There's no deterrent to keep these people from doing this crime because we don't have stiff enough penalties when they are caught.
I prefer, where we have a clear case of human trafficking, to see prosecution occur on the federal level. Because on the federal level, the penalties begin at 10 years and it goes to life imprisonment. And so there is I believe there's a far more effective message in combating it when we see the perpetrators of this crime facing 10 years to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The nice thing about a federal prosecution is you get the time, you do the time. That keeps the trafficker off the street. It sends a message to anyone else who has an interest in following through with this criminal activity. And it gives that person, most importantly, an opportunity to truly be free and to begin a life somewhere else, out of the clutches of that perpetrator and that whole ring of activity.
My daughter today is alive and safe, and today that's all I can hope for. You know, she's doing okay, but it's tough. I don't know how she's ever going to recover from this. These girls, I think about these girls, and I think as a mom, knowing everything that happened to my daughter is devastating. I mean, it sometimes debilitates me. I'm an adult and it didn't happen to me. I can't imagine how these girls can ever come back from this. I know that they can because I believe in a God that is in the business of healing and restoring. But aside from that, I can't imagine their life. I can't imagine what that will have to look like for them.
All of the women that I interviewed suffered from headaches, from nightmares, from post-traumatic stress disorder, and most of them wanted to die. You know, they really wanted to die.
She had a home to come home to, but there weren't any services for her because there's no services specific to this type of crime. And when I began to understand that this crime preys on children that are even more vulnerable, runaways, homeless girls, that's who the pimps are preying on. Because these girls have nobody that's looking for them. And when they are found, they have no home to go to. And as a mother, that does not sit well with me. As a mother, I look at this and I think, oh my gosh, my daughter was just one of hundreds of thousands of girls that this is happening to. And as a mother, that does not sit well with me. So as a mother, I speak out, trying to encourage people to understand that this is happening right here, right now, today, not just in Cambodia or Thailand or India, right here in the United States, right here in California. And it's so prevalent that to continue to be ignorant about this issue is unacceptable.
And as long as men are willing to pay for sex, women and children are going to be sold into slavery, period. And that's not going to change until we can change the demand. There actually is a lot that students can do. One is to spread awareness. I can't tell you how many times I speak on this topic all the time, and afterwards everyone comes up to me and says, gosh, we never heard of this before. So the first thing is you can't change a problem unless you're aware of the problem. So students can be very active in raising awareness, and that's really good.
I beg with people, please understand that this is happening, research it, get educated, become aware, and find out what you can do, because all of us can do something to fight this crime.
It's a huge problem and people need to get educated about it and then do something, whether it's donating money or giving a house party and educating your friends or anything that you can do to help spread awareness. The more people are aware, the less traffickers will be able to succeed at what they do.
It's been growing, this attention to trafficking, since 1997, and the problem is getting worse. And so I've become absolutely convinced that there's no way to stop trafficking until you stop the demand. One way is to educate boys so that when they grow up, they don't automatically assume that it's a male privilege and a right and a ritual of passage, right, to go buy a whore. The minute it's okay to commodify a woman, then you allow people to be sold as objects. And once that's in the consciousness of somebody, then you end up with trafficking. I mean, that's where it ends.
You know, you're the future. You're the ones who are going to go out and make a difference. And so I think it's just like with AIDS. Nobody wanted to talk about AIDS until it was a huge epidemic.
The ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me a heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I think the biggest misconception is that it only happens over there somewhere, like in Thailand or in Russia, because those are the stories that you maybe hear about or see on a TV show, and I don't think people are aware how much is happening here in America, and that the young, especially young boys and girls, are really at risk.
There are slaves here. They're here in Butte County, they're in Northern California, they're in Sacramento, if they're in Tahoe, as you know, it's happening here.
We live in El Dorado Hills, and that happened right here in our sunny little suburb of El Dorado Hills, where there's this perception that nothing like this could ever happen here.
We're beginning to have evidences of and reason to believe it's much larger than the current statistics may bear out. So it's not just a problem that occurs somewhere else and happens to citizens of other countries. Citizens of the United States are victims of this crime, and this crime is perpetrated here as robustly as it is in other nations of the world.
When I was interviewing, I was in Moldova, and I was interviewing a woman who jumped out of a 7th floor window to escape. And she ended up in 3 months in the hospital, and it was only once she was in the hospital she even knew what country she was in. And she'd been rescued, and she ended up back home in her village in Moldova. And she was an extremely strong and courageous woman. And I asked her, is there anything you want me to tell people in the United States when I get back and write my book? And she said, tell them that we're human. Just tell them that we're human.
Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the broken-hearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Step out on a busy street, see a girl and our eyes meet. Does her best to smile at me, to hide what's underneath. There's a man just to her right, black suit and a bright red tie. Too ashamed to tell his wife he's out of work, he's buying time. All those people